There is no business that has penetrated every aspect of our lives as much as the coffee business. We drink it in the morning to wake up. We drink it in the afternoon to stay up. We drink it with friends, with colleagues, with family. And we're also willing to pay exorbitant amounts of money for it. Take New York City, for example. There is an average of 28 coffee shops for every square mile in Manhattan. In Los Angeles, the number is 17 per square mile. But what if I told you that one day this may not be enough? That sooner or later the demand for coffee might outstrip supply. What if one day we just run out of coffee? It's a question that has kept me up at night, because if we run out of coffee, we would have to find something else to fill our mugs in the morning. It's a terrifying thought. So today, we are going to talk about why this could happen. What will happen when it does happen, and how we can prevent it from happening by growing more coffee trees. Let's start with the basics. Coffee beans are, well, beans from a tree called Coffea. The most popular species is Coffea arabica, which accounts for around 2/3 of global production. And the second most common is Coffea robusta. Arabica is smoother and sweeter and is often used in blends, while Robusta has a stronger, more bitter flavor. Robusta contains twice as much caffeine per bean than Arabica and is often used in espresso blends for its intense kick. Brazil is the world's largest producer of coffee, followed by Vietnam, Colombia, Indonesia, and Ethiopia. Interestingly, Ethiopia is where coffee was first discovered by a goat herder named Koldi. According to legend, he noticed that his goats were unusually energetic after eating the berries from certain trees. Intrigued, Koldi tried the berries himself and experienced a similar boost in energy. He shared his discovery with monks who, thinking they were a gift from God, began brewing the beans into a drink. In the years since then, coffee has become the second most traded commodity in the world after oil. In 2020, the value of global coffee trade reached $30 billion. But despite its popularity, wild coffee plants only produce around 1% of the coffee we consume. The other 99% comes from cultivated plants. This makes us particularly vulnerable to disruptions in the coffee supply chain. And there are several reasons why we could one day run out of coffee. One of the biggest threats to the world's coffee supply is climate change. Since the 1980s, we've already lost 40% of the world's coffee forests. As temperatures rise, the habitats where coffee plants can thrive are shrinking, forcing farmers to grow their crops at higher altitudes. This not only makes farming more expensive, but it also reduces the quality of the beans. Higher altitudes mean less sunlight and more rain, which leads to a weaker, more acidic coffee. But don't worry, I've got a solution for this one. If global temperatures rise by 3 degrees Celsius, experts predict that we can offset this by planting 200 million new coffee trees. Now that is a lot of trees, but it's definitely doable. For context, China planted 66 million trees in one day in 2011, so it doesn't require an extraordinary effort. It just requires a sustained effort. But unfortunately, climate change isn't the only threat facing the world's coffee supply. Another big problem is disease. Coffee plants are susceptible to a variety of fungal and bacterial diseases such as leaf rust, which can decimate entire crops. In the 1970s, a fungal disease known as coffee leaf rust spread across Central America, reducing production by as much as 50% in some countries. To combat this, farmers have started to look for naturally resistant varieties of coffee, such as the bourbon and Typica varieties, which are resistant to coffee leaf rust. However, these varieties are not as productive as the modern hybrid varieties, meaning that farmers must choose between yield and disease resistance. Fortunately, scientists have another trick up their sleeves. They're using genetic engineering to create disease-resistant coffee plants. But don't worry, this is not like the Frankenfood that you hear about in the news. It's actually quite subtle. Scientists are simply inserting a single gene from a naturally resistant variety of coffee. into a susceptible variety. For example, in 2019, Canadian company Sony announced that it had developed a variety of Arabica coffee that was resistant to coffee leaf rust using this technique. Of course, some people will probably be worried about drinking genetically modified coffee, but studies show that GM foods are safe for human consumption. In fact, the majority of the food we eat already contains GM ingredients. Corn, for example, is almost entirely GM, and it's been estimated that GM crops save $100 billion in pesticide costs worldwide. Another threat to the world's coffee supply is simply demand. As more and more people around the world develop a taste for coffee, demand is likely to outstrip supply. In fact, we're already seeing this happen. Between 2015 and 2025, global coffee consumption is expected to rise by 50%. Sooner or later, this will put pressure on prices. And if coffee becomes too expensive, some people may switch to other beverages. If that happens, coffee farmers will be left with an oversupply of coffee, which could lead to the demise of coffee as we know it. Luckily, this is easily solved with free market mechanisms. When demand increases, prices go up. That incentivizes farmers to plant more coffee trees. Of course, this takes time. It's not like we can just flip a switch and get more coffee beans overnight. But eventually the market will reach a new equilibrium. Now, all of these problems are relatively easy to solve individually, but together they pose a serious threat to the world's coffee supply. If we don't take action now, we could see a decline in coffee production as early as 2040. At this point, you might be wondering what will happen if we do run out of coffee. Well, the truth is we won't really know until it happens. Some people say they'll switch to tea, while others say they'll switch to soft drinks or even beer. But the vast majority say they would just stop drinking caffeinated beverages altogether. Personally, I think that would be a huge mistake. If we lose coffee, we should try to replace it with a different plant-based beverage like chicory, for example. Chicory is a coffee substitute made from the roasted roots of the chicory plant. It has a slightly bitter taste that some people say resembles coffee. What about decaf coffee? After all, it doesn't contain any caffeine. Well, the answer is yes, but it's not really coffee anymore. You see, caffeine is what gives coffee its characteristic bitter taste. Without caffeine, it would taste like sweet caramel. And it's that bitterness that many people are looking for in a coffee. So no, decaf coffee will not save us. Some people might be tempted to switch to tea, but that's not an option either. Tea contains roughly half the amount of caffeine as coffee, so it wouldn't really help. And what about soft drinks? Well, they do contain caffeine, but it's synthetic caffeine, which means that it doesn't have the same taste or effect as natural caffeine. Basically, it's not the same thing. So what if we ran out of coffee and switched to chicory? How long would that last? Well, the good news is that the chicory plant grows very quickly and can be harvested for its roots after just 18 months. This means that if we switch to chicory, we would have a steady supply of coffee substitute for decades to come. Plus, chicory has other health benefits as well. It's rich in antioxidants and has anti-inflammatory properties. It's also a good source of fiber and minerals like potassium and magnesium. So next time you're feeling adventurous, try a cup of chicory. You might just be surprised. Alright everyone, thanks for watching.